What on earth is going on? Last night, October 7th, came to the United States of America. A young couple preparing to get married. A beautiful young couple. He had just bought her an engagement ring to propose to her next week. Gunned down in front of the U.S. Holocaust Museum, I believe it was, in Washington, D.C. for one reason only. Only because they were Jewish. In fact, when this beast was arrested last night, you could watch on the video as he cries out, he screams out, "Free Palestine." Free Palestine is not a call to help the Arabs as much as it is a call to kill the Jews. I believe that Free Palestine should become illegal in this country. It is a call to murder. It's an incitement to hate. It is, it's just a disaster in terms of, you remember what Claudine Gay, the president of Harvard, said when she testified in front of Congress, when she was asked if Free Palestine is a call to genocide? She said, it depends on the context. Now, if you just change the color and the ethnicity of the group that was being discriminated against, if they were black, what would have happened if you would have answered, it depends on the context? Just think about that for a moment. Unfortunately, tragically, we Jews are with high thresholds of tolerance, tragically, and we've been enduring this verbal abuse, this emotional abuse for far too long. It's time to put an end to this insanity. It should be considered illegal when a young couple is gunned down to death here in America. Who would have thought that this could happen in America? That the Hamas war is now inside of America. And when you look at the comments on social media, on Arabic channels, you see just emoticons of hearts and smiley faces and happiness and celebrations for these two young people that were killed. You know, it's one tragedy when a young mother, 30 years old, last week was on her way to give birth in Israel, in sovereign Jewish territory, Judea and Samaria, a place that has been Jewish for 3,000 years, 3,800 years. On her way to give birth, she's gunned down and executed. On her way to the hospital, her child was named without even having a bris, because the child is still in critical condition. I'm not sure the status of the father exactly. I think he's still also in critical condition. But the baby was given a name even without a bris. And this is what kind of enemy that we're fighting against. These are people that are after us because we're Jewish. It's clearly not because it's not merely a geographic. Because if that was the case, then why would you kill a Jew in America? What's an American Jew got to do with the war in Israel? Clearly, it's not geographic to the land. It is ideological to the nation, to the people. It's incredibly sobering of a thought. And the question was just posed about what is the Jewish claim to the land of Israel, right? Can you repeat your question?
The Jew, if I understand it correctly, the Jews conquered many nations in their quest to the promised land. And God was, supported them and enabled them and gave them the power and the will and the wherewithal to defeat nations that were imminently stronger in some cases.
Okay, so what's the question?
Than the Jews. So people claim we're conquerors. So did we conquer the land of Israel?
Okay, so the question is being posed is, how could the land of Israel belong to the Jewish people if we conquered it from nations that lived there before us?
Thank
right?
you.
Let me ask you a question. Can you name for me one single nation upon the face of this earth, one country that has been living there since the beginning of time that did not conquer a previous nation? America? Did America conquer anybody before they was here?
Well, the
Native Americans, right? How about Europe? Is there one country in Europe that have been there forever? Can you think of one? The answer is no. Every single nation in the Western world, for sure, is a nation that has conquered another nation. In fact, it's amazing. Isn't it amazing when Spain and England, and France are threatening Israel with what? With concrete steps that they want to cut ties with the European Union. They want Israel to cut ties with the European Union because of the genocide in Gaza. Now, Spain and France and England should know a lot about genocide. These are masters of genocide. The Jewish people were kicked out of England for 400 years. They were told that they were not allowed to live there. You talk about Judenrein, you talk about ethnic cleansing. The English are masters at ethnic cleansing. They should understand what it is. When it comes to the Spaniards, they did exactly the same thing. In 1492, they kicked out every last Jew from Spain, and anyone that remained was forced to convert to a faith not their own, to Christianity. Then, when these people were discovered to be fake Jews, fake Christians, because they didn't sincerely convert to Christianity because they were too old to leave, maybe they were too frail, or maybe they had a sick mother or father or child or husband or wife, and they couldn't actually run away to some new country, so they were forced to live as Christians, but yet their convictions were dear to them. They were then burned at the stake after being tortured in the Spanish Inquisitory prisons. So the Spanish are masters of expulsion, persecution, ethnic cleansing, torture. These guys are good. And then the Portuguese are even worse, because the Portuguese, when the Jews ran away to Portugal from 1492, they went to Portugal in 1497. There, the king promised them safe haven. But in 1497, it was a bait and switch. He introduced the Inquisition there. And as the Jews were running away, he promised them to give them ships for safe passage wherever they wanted to go. At the harbor, he gave them a bait and switch, and then he forced them to convert. So whereas the Spanish Jews at least were given a choice to run away or convert, the Portuguese Jews were forcibly converted without any other choice, right? Talk about France. Also, the Jews were kicked out of France for 300, since 1391, I think it was. They were kicked out of France. So these nations, people that live in glass houses shouldn't throw stones. These are masters in genocide, masters in persecution. And for them to lecture the Jewish people, the victim, about occupation, it's just insanity. Never in the history of the world has there been a war of a victim that's been attacked from every side. Think about it. Let's look at the map. Yemen from the south, Iran, Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, what's falsely called the West Bank. That's Judea and Samaria. Then you got, of course, Gaza. And then you got Egypt. Egypt is sending in drones into Gaza to be able to deliver them weapons, which Israel's constantly trying to intercept. From every single direction, Israel's being attacked. And yet, who's considered the aggressor? It just makes no sense. Who's considered the aggressor? Israel. The victim. The victim's the aggressor. It's like your kid comes home from school with a bloody nose, and then the principal adds insult to injury and says, your kid is being a bully. It makes no sense, right? Did you hear the insanity of the United Nations? Yeah, was it 2 days ago? When he said, the head of human rights something in the United Nations, he said 14,000 babies are going to die in Gaza in the next 48 hours from hunger. Did you hear about this? What is he, God? He knows that 14,000 babies are going to die from hunger? This is just an insanely irresponsible statement. Because, bad news travels halfway around the world before good news ever puts on its shoes. Whether or not he admitted the insanity, the bias, the unfiltered and shameless bias of his statement is almost irrelevant, because there's no way that you can retract such a statement. Such a thing is seen as gospel by the anti-Semites of the world. They'll take that statement from the United Nations. They'll take whatever the ICC is going to say, no matter how biased it is, and they'll just use that as their justification for murder. Justification for murder. And it's really insane. And I wish that President Trump would shut down the United Nations or kick him out of the United States.
Take away the money.
This is a terrorist organization. They are terrorists in suits. The United Nations are terrorists in suits, and they vote in blocks. You scratch my back and I'll scratch yours, even though I don't necessarily agree with what you're doing. It doesn't matter, because I have a better interest. Therefore, it's like the kids in the schoolyard that are voting on who to pick on tomorrow or today. It just doesn't make any sense. The idea behind the United Nations made sense when it was established, just after World War II. But it's become a self-defeating entity. Back to the people of Israel and to your question. So there is not a single nation. I dare you, I challenge you to find a nation out there in the world that has not conquered the people that came before it, right? when they talk about the Arabs having been kicked out of the land of Israel in 1948. I should bring to your attention something very, very interesting, which I came across. So they talk about the Jews were kicked out the Palestinians in 1948, right? Forced them out of Palestine, so to speak, right? That's the line that they use, right? First of all, what about the millions of Jews that actually were kicked out of Arab lands, of Iraq, Iran, Syria, Yemen, Algeria, Sudan, Egypt? In 1948, when Israel declared independence, all of these Arab nations practically expelled all of their Jewish constituents. Now, what happened with the so-called Palestinians living in Israel in 1948? They were not forced out of Palestine. In fact, there's a document I'm about to read to you here, which is the British report on Haifa, April 1948. I'm going to show it to you here. This is the original document. I'm going to show you a little, just so you can see it. And then I'm going to read it to you. You can just see it's handwritten, the typewritten. Here's what it says. Here's what it says. Well, the Jews asked the Arabs not to leave, actually. But the Arab leaders insisted on evacuating the Arab population from Palestine. Why? Because the surrounding Arab states were planning to attack the new Israeli state, destroy it, and then let the Arabs return. The ones who left, let them return. Here's what it says in this document, written by the British District Commissioner Haifa Dent of Berlin Linifa in April 1948. Ready? Dated 26th of April, 1948. Here's what it says. An appeal has been made to the Arabs by the Jews to reopen their shops and businesses to relieve the difficulties of feeding the Arab population. Evacuation was still going on yesterday, and several trips were made by Z-Craft to Akko. Roads, too, were crowded with people leaving Haifa with all their belongings. At a meeting yesterday afternoon, Arab leaders reiterated their determination to evacuate the entire Arab population, and they have been given the loan of 10 3-ton military trucks as of this morning to assist the evacuation. Right? When the Arabs talk about the Nakba is the catastrophe, what we call the Declaration of Independence, they call Nakba, which is Arabic for catastrophe. The catastrophe is not that we won the war. The catastrophe is not that they were kicked out of the land, because they voluntarily left the land. The catastrophe is that they lost the war. Right? Like I always say, anti-Semites never fail to fail. Anti-Semites never fail to fail. And yes, Chris, aren't Arab Semites? Yes, technical detail. Arabs are Semites, because what's a Semite? A Semite is a descendant of a person called Shem, one of the 3 sons of Noah from the 10th generation since creation of the world. Noah in the Great Flood, he had 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Yefet. Yefet became the father of the Asian nations. Ham became the father of the African nations, and Shem became the father of the Middle Eastern nations. So yes, anti-Semites technically would include Arabs, but I don't think the term anti-Semites is even relevant anymore. It's really anti-Jewish. It's just anti-Jewish. That's really what we're talking about. So maybe, Chris, you're more correct. We should indeed start calling a spade a spade. It's not anti-Semitism. It's like making a fancy word that nobody really understands to describe something which is very, very simple. It's just anti-Jewish. That's all it is. It's shameless. Now, when it came to your specific question of, let's talk about the Jews conquering the land. So how could it be that God gave the land of Israel to the Jewish people if they conquered the land? That's your question. The answer is like this. When God created the world, he promised the land of Israel to the Jewish people. Now, that doesn't mean that they moved in right away. It means that they were tenants in the meantime, right? So throughout the book of Genesis, you'll find dozens of promises to Abraham, to your descendants, I will give the land. It also says in the past tense, I have given the land. This is going to be an eternal inheritance for you, for your children, for the land that you have walked upon. Her length and her breadth will be a gift to your descendants. The land of Israel was given by God to the Jewish people. Now,
and it describes the borders.
It even describes the borders. Absolutely. It's very specific, the borders of the land of Israel in the book of Genesis and elsewhere in Numbers in the Torah. The concept here is that God gave the land of Israel. He created the world. He's the master. He gave the land to whatever nations were living there at that time. Then he took it away from them by making them lose the war, right? He gave it then to the Jewish people, right? But if you're going to come to the Jewish people with a double standard and say, well, the Jewish people need to return the land to whom they conquered it from, but America does not need to return the land to the Native Americans, right? Can you imagine? They call us colonizers. Very, very interesting question here. You hear about colonizers, right? You know how many countries speak Hebrew? One.
Yeah.
You know how many countries speak English?
Most
Countless.
of
You know how many countries speak French? You know how many countries speak Spanish? You know, if we're colonizers, we are the worst colonizers in the history of the world. Okay? It's like we're the worst genocide in the history of the world. Because if we're trying to do a genocide, whoever's in charge of this genocide needs to be fired immediately because there are more Arabs living than dying. This is a big problem for the genocidal office, if there is one, in the land of Israel, because whoever's in charge of genocide is failing very, very badly. Because there are more Arabs today than there were in October 7th.
20% of Israel are Arabs. Huh?
20% of Israel is Arabs, tragically,
Something like that.
unfortunately. Yes, that's true, unfortunately. But within Gaza, there's more Arabs today in Gaza than there were before when the war on October 7th. Because more, they're just living, right? And this idiot from the United Nations who made himself a self-declared prophet who's deciding who's going to live and who's going to die. He thinks he's God. 14,000 babies are going to die in the next 48 hours from hunger. You watch the videos coming out of Gaza. You go to YouTube. You go to social media on Arab channels, and they're like, they're putting out buffets. They're putting out fancy drinks and these little Arabic foods. There's no famine in Gaza. If you do the math, actually, if you actually do the math, it's very interesting. There's more food in Gaza than there is in most African countries. This is very, very interesting. Here it is. One second, let me see if I can find this piece here.
Because that's like being the tallest kid in the 5 feet 10 and under league.
Here, check this out. Check this out. Watch this. Since October 7th, Gaza has received more than 300,000 metric tons of humanitarian aid. 300,000 metric tons delivered through over 22,000 trucks. Do you know how many trucks that is? 22,000 trucks since October 7th to a population of just 2.1 million people. That translates to roughly 143 kilograms of aid per person in just a few months. Can you imagine eating that much? 143 kilograms per person, assuming an average of 3,500 calories per kilogram of food, which is standard for calorie defense emergency rations. This aid contains more than 1.05 trillion calories in total, with Gaza's population requiring approximately 4.2 billion calories per day, based on a 2,000 calorie daily diet per person. Then this aid alone could fully feed the entire population for over 250 consecutive days, with 3 meals a day and room for dessert. Put differently, if the intake increased to 4 heavy meals per day, which far exceeds any humanitarian minimum, the people of Gaza would be covered for roughly 190 days. To compare this to European cities, the city of Paris, with its 2.1 million residents, it's comparable, Paris and Gaza, right? Same amount of people, could be fully fed for 8 months with the same amount of calories. Berlin, with 3.6 million people, could be fed for 5 months, and Rome, with 2.8 million people, could survive in this aid for 6 months. Meanwhile, countries in Africa face actual famine with a fraction of this attention and delivery. South Sudan has 6.3 million people facing urgent food insecurity, receives less than 1/4 of Gaza's per capita aid. Somalia, with over 7 million people in need, receives even less, with estimates showing less than $30 worth of aid per capita, compared to Gaza's estimated $133 per person in aid, which is being provided. Chad, Niger, and Burkina Faso receive figures so low they don't even reach the global minimum nutritional requirements. If we turn Gaza into a metaphorical restaurant, it is essentially receiving 400 supply trucks per day, delivering gourmet-level logistics to every street, while war-torn regions in Africa are left to scavenge for leaves and sip contaminated water, completely abandoned by headlines and hashtags. This is not about hunger. It's about overfeeding a narrative, right? This is not about people that care about the unfortunate. This is not people that care about the hungry. This is not about people who care about the underprivileged. This is about people who hate Jews. The discussion about humanitarian aid is a discussion of hate. It's not a discussion of love. It's a discussion of tearing down the strength and the power and the influence of the Jewish people. It's not about caring for the poor Palestinians. And let's put it into context for a moment as well. Back to your question, I'm sorry. So who were the people that the Jewish people stole the land from? Who did we conquer? I mean, assuming you do want to apply the double standard, assuming you say America doesn't need to give the land back to the Native Americans, and nobody in Europe needs to give the land back to the people that they conquered it from, but Israel does, right? Okay, fine. So let's talk about it. So who did we take the land from? You know, the Jewish people have been living in the land of Israel since Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. There was a tiny period of time about 43 years, when there were very few Jews living in the land of Israel. And that happened after the destruction of our first temple in the year 586 BCE. Can you imagine? 586 BCE, after the Babylonians, the Iraqis, devastated the land. They conquered us, they kicked us out of the land and exiled us to Babylon. They left a guy by the name of Gedaliah in charge of the land. A Jew, like a trophy, a vassal king, or like a vassal governor for the Jewish people in the land of Israel, who would pay tribute taxes to the king. And when he was in charge of the farming Jews of the land of Israel, a little civil war broke out. Another fellow Jew killed him on Rosh Hashanah. And that's why we fast on the day after Rosh Hashanah, a fast called Tzom Gedalia. Why is it such a significant fast? Because as a result of that, the Babylonians couldn't trust the Jews anymore, and they pretty much kicked all the Jews out of the land of Israel for about 43 years. 70 years after that, the Jews were, after the destruction of our first temple, the Jews came back to build a second temple. So we weren't gone for very long. But it was about 40 years of a gap that the Jews were not in the land of Israel. This is, you know how old Islam is? Do you know how old Islam is? Islam is the little kid. It's a new kid in the block in the pre-grade, preschool age compared to us in our geriatric years, the Jewish people, because the Islam is 1,500 years old. That's it. Christianity also is 2,000 years old, but it's so about Islam. 1,500 years old. That's it. That's when Muhammad showed up on the scene. Before that, they were just a bunch of nomadic nomads running around. They weren't settled in any particular place. This is who the Arabs are. They claim they're Muslims. This is our land. You're only 1,500 years old. That's why when you look at the Temple Mount, what are they doing? They're trying to dig. The Jews stupidly, foolishly gave the Temple Mount to the Arabs, thinking this is going to make peace. Terrible idea. What they're doing up there is that they're trying to dig up the Temple Mount in order to remove any trace to rewrite history. Because if you find the temple, built by Solomon that goes back 2,800 years, you're going to have a problem. It's going to be a problem because the Muslims are just 1,500 years old. So where does this name Palestine come from? In the year 135 CE, Roman Emperor Hadrian vanquished the Jewish rebellion in the land of Israel. After the Romans had destroyed our temple in 69 CE, the Jews managed to revolt in 132 CE. And 2.5 years, they built an independent state of the Jewish people in Israel, led by Bar Kokhba and Rabbi Akiva. But when the Romans eventually quelled that rebellion in 135 CE, Hadrian wanted to rewrite history. You know what he did? He wanted to erase Israel from the map. And he was pretty successful, actually. What he did was he changed the name of Jerusalem to Aelia Capitolina. Thank God that didn't stick. Nobody even heard of that name before. But the second thing that he did is that he changed the land of Judea to Palestina. He just changed it. He just casually.
That was his wife, wasn't it?
No. He named it Palestina after the Philistines, who were the biblical nation from whom the Jewish people conquered them. There were actually 7 nations in the land of Israel from whom the Jewish people conquered the land of Israel. One of them was the Philistines, but I guess he figured he's not going to call it 7 names. He called it one name, Philistines. That's what he chose, Philistines. Now, the Philistines were long extinct because the Jews had killed them all. But, Romans are very good at just making minor modifications that lasted a very long time. I'll give you an example. They were super narcissists, the Roman emperors. If you've ever wondered why the English calendar is such a funny calendar, you got some months of 30 days, some months of 31 days. There's a system to it, which never really made sense to me. There's 30 days, 31 days, 30 days, 31 days. And then you got this random month of February that's got 29 days or 28 days. And you're like, what did February do wrong? Like what could that kid have done in class to deserve 2 days removed? Seriously, was he just the bad kid? What did he do? The reason was because Emperor Julius Caesar had a month named after himself, July, right? And July had 31 days. So the next emperor, Augustus, he was pretty upset about this. He was like, look, I'm August. It's not enough that you have a month named after yourself, right? Super narcissist, right? It's not enough that you have an actual month named after you. Imagine there was a month called Raw Burger. Can you imagine? Wouldn't that be lovely to have David Vigler, the whole world for the rest of time is attributing time to you? That's quite a compliment. No. It wasn't good enough because Augustus had August, which had 30 days, and July had 31. So what did he do? He just kidnapped the day from February. He was like, yeah, just take it from February. Nobody's going to notice. Right? So these guys, that's what they did. So when the Roman Emperor Hadrian decided to do that, I don't know why Hadrian didn't get a month. I'm not sure what he did, but maybe his check wasn't big enough. But what Hadrian did is he just changed the name of the land to Palestina. And ever since then, it's kind of been called Palestine. My father, on his passport, it says he was born in Palestine. Why was he born in Palestine in 1947? Because that was the name of the land. And if you look, it says it's in Hebrew. So Palestine was a Jewish place. It wasn't a secular place. It was only in after the 6 Day War. After the 6 Day War, after the Arabs realized that they lost the War of Independence in 1948, and they lost the Sinai Campaign in 1956, the Suez Canal War, the Suez War, not Suez Canal, the Sinai Desert War, sorry. And they noticed that they lost the 6 Day War in 1967. They were like, we can't beat the Jews militarily. But the KGB told them that you can beat them diplomatically. And what you do is you just invent a nation. You are the Palestinians. Say, we are those guys. Mazel tov, we're the Palestinians. My father's a Palestinian. My father was born there. You know, my family tree goes back. My family moved to the Holy Land. I'll tell you which year my family moved there. You can check it out. You can see my family tree at jewishgardens.com/roots. That's jewishgardens.com/roots. I'm just going to show you when my family moved in there. It was in the year here. She was born in 1798, but she moved in 1845. That's when my Babi Menucha Rachel. She's very, very famous name in the city of Tzfat. No, not Tzfat. In Hebron. That's where she's buried, and I'll post it in the link over here if anybody wants to see it on my family tree. But she moved in 1845. My family's been living in Israel since 1845. It wasn't called Israel; it was called Palestine. That's just what they happened to call it because of the Romans. Not that these guys are Palestinians. The Palestinians, he called them Filistina. You know what's funny about the Palestinian name? You know why these people couldn't possibly be the Palestinians? Just like one obvious reason. Do you know that the Palestinians cannot pronounce the word Palestine? Because there's no letter P in their alphabet. Isn't that funny? How could you possibly be the Palestinians? You know, somebody told me yesterday that his non-Jewish daughter-in-law called him up and said, she said, you know, Dad, do you have Tay-Sachs? Like, are you a carrier of Tay-Sachs? He says, no, but like, why do you need to know? She says, because I'm Tay-Sachs positive. So he looks at his non-Jewish daughter-in-law and he's like, how could a, he said, I'm going to quote his exact words, how could a shiksa from, I don't know where, be a Tay-Sachs carrier? Like, how's that even possible that you're a carrier of Tay-Sachs? That's like an Ashkenazi Jew disease. Like, how's it even possible that you have that? So she says, well, my mother's mother was Jewish. This is the story, how it goes, right? So it turns out that, you know, you can't fight the science, right? So if you can't pronounce your own name, there's something very fishy about it. You see what I'm saying, right? So back to where we were going here today, is that we're not occupiers in our own homeland. There's no other nation in the world, you know, let's flip it around. There's no other nation in the world that can say that they have lived in their country for as long as the Jewish people have. Maybe the Chinese, I don't know, maybe the Chinese, Indians maybe, but at least not in the Western world, okay? They can say that they've lived in their country for that many years. And there's not any nation in the world that can say, in the Western world again, they can say that they speak the same language, have the same customs, and study the same culture and laws as they did 3,000 years ago in this place. Can Americans say, yeah, we've been doing this 3,000 years ago. We were doing July 4th barbecues 3,000 years ago. I mean, nobody can say that. It's ridiculous, right? No French, no Spanish, no Greek. Nobody can say that. I mean, even the Greeks, they're not actually even speaking the same. Maybe it is the same Greek language. I don't know. I don't know about that. But when it comes to the Jews in the land of Israel, there's a reason why it's called the Promised Land. The Promised Land. What does that mean, the Promised Land? It means the land that was promised by the Master of the universe to the Jewish people. And how do we know that? That's published in the most printed book in the history of the world. That's our title deed. The most published book in the history of the world. It's called the Bible. But I want to say this to you. We can't fix the anti-Semites. I don't think we can fix the anti-Semites, but I think we can fix ourselves. So I tell people in therapy that, you know, if you're struggling with your wife or your child or your parent or something, you can't change the other person. You cannot change the other person, but you can only change yourself. So what are you going to do about changing it? Ooh, sorry about that. I don't have the time. What can you do to change yourself? What can you do to change yourself? And I want to say this. I want to end up with a story here by saying this. Yeah, now, Carla, this is maybe why they want to burn the Bible. Now you get it. The story goes about David Ben Gurion. Well, the story goes to Rabbi Israel Meir Lau. He's the former chief rabbi of Israel. May he live and be well. He's the survivor of Buchenwald, of the Holocaust. Wrote a great book, by the way. You should read his book, Rabbi Israel Meir Lau. Anyway, so he says like this, that he went to visit David Ben Gurion in his Moshav Sde Boker in the Negev, in the south of Israel. And he asked him a question. He says, is it true that in 1933 you came before the Peel Commission? The Peel Commission was the English tribunal that was trying to determine who the land of Israel belongs to, the Jews or the Arabs. So they had all these Arabs that were coming and giving testimony, and the last one to give testimony was David Ben Gurion. He said, yeah, achen, emet v'yatziv, he said, true and affirmed. That's true. Fine. And David Ben Gurion proceeded to say that how he testified. He said, look, when it came to the Mayflower, the ones who discovered America, we don't know what they were wearing. We don't know what they were eating on the boat. Do you know what they were eating? We don't know what they were talking about in the boat. We don't know what they were worried about in the boat. And that was just 300 years ago, not even, right? But when it comes to the people of Israel, we're here not 300 years, but 3,000 years. And we know exactly the language that they were talking about when they came out of Egypt into the land of Israel. We know exactly what they were wearing. We know what they were eating. We know what they were worrying about. We know all the details because this is our land. This is what's promised to us by God. And he was very proud of himself, David Ben Gurion, because this really was the straw that broke the camel's back in terms of giving the British, who had the mandate of Israel since the Ottoman Empire was kicked out in the end of World War I. They were in charge of the land of Israel. It gave them the courage to be able to, the conviction to be able to give the Jewish people at least a small portion of the land of Israel. Fine. So then Rabbi Lau turns to David Ben Gurion, who was known to be, not exactly a religious person. He says to him, tell me, Mr. Prime Minister, what would happen if somebody showed up to ask you for the title deed of your house? He said, I would give it to him. Okay. And what would happen if he found the title deed of your house? No, sorry. One last thing. In the story by the Peel Commission, David Ben Gurion called out and he said, this is our kushtan. Kushtan. This is our kushtan in Turkish, I think, means truth. This is our affirmation. This is our verification. The Bible is our verification. The Bible is our verification. Fine. It's our kushtan. So Rabbi Lau says to David Ben Gurion, so if somebody was to ask you for your title deed, you would give it to them. Very good. What happens if the title deed was ripped to shreds and was covered in mud and schmutz and other ungodly smells and sounds and sights? And what would happen if you presented them with some ripped, torn, broken, moldy document and you gave them, this is my title deed? What would they say? What would you say? You're a lawyer. What would happen if somebody gave you a title deed that looked like that, ripped to shreds? What would happen?
There's other ways to verify.
What about that title deed?
That deed?
Is it valid?
Question it because it's unclear, but there's other ways to verify.
Okay. So said Rabbi Lau to David Ben Gurion, you're claiming that the Bible is your kushtan, but then you treat it like garbage. You throw it around. You don't read it. You don't observe it. You don't follow its laws. You treat it like a leper, like some sort of an outcast, and then you expect them to believe that this is your. You expect them to believe that this is your kushtan. It's only when we Jews, again, we can only fix ourselves. We can't fix the anti-Semites. When we strengthen our connection to our faith, when we strengthen our connection to our God. If you don't have a relationship with God and then you come screaming to the world with we got the promised land, who promised you the land? Oh, the God that you don't believe in? That's the one who promised you the land? That's a baba mice. That's a joke. But when we have the courage to stand up into the world and say we believe, we're Jews, we're proud. They believe, by the way. The question is if we believe. They know, they believe in the God of Israel. We're the ones that are struggling. They believe it's the promised land. The question is if we do. We don't have the courage to stand up and tell the world that it's the promised land, but they're waiting for us to do so. When we have the courage to stand up and say, I'm a Jew and I'm proud, and I lay tefillin, and I keep kosher as much as I can, and I try to rest on the Shabbos day, and I study Torah, and I do mitzvahs, and I affiliate to the land of Israel, and the people of Israel, and the God of Israel, and the laws of Israel. When we do that, that's when we have a title deed that's framed in a glass casing, something that's valuable and something that's valid. I believe that the God of Israel is waiting for us to sign on the dotted line of our document of the promised land. And when we do so, God willing, we will no longer know any further sorrow, no further suffering, but rather the entire world will be living in a place of peace and brotherhood. Amen.
Well, what's
Amen.
more important than just believing is saying it. So
Don't just believe it,
Do it.
say it.
Don't argue the
Do it.
67 war. Don't argue the Balfour Declaration. Don't argue the UN resolution.
Beautiful point.
Argue the fact
Right.
that it's in the
Beautiful.
Bible.
I love that you said that, because
Change the narrative.
if you're going to go back to the United Nations that gave us the land of Israel in 1948 from that vote, you know what? So they changed their mind. But if you go, why would you want to go back to a vote that happened 75 years ago, 77 years ago? Go back to a vote that happened 3,800 years ago. You know, if you can have a fine wine or if you can have sugar water, what are you going to go for? Why would you go for bubkis if you can get the Mercedes, right? The Maybach, right? God Almighty has promised you the land. Don't be embarrassed of your own identity, of your own gift, and don't insult God by turning your back on his gift. Well said.
And all three religions believe in the Old Testament. Arabs, Christians, and Jews all look at Abraham as their patriarch, so you can't have it both ways. If you believe Abraham is your patriarch, and if you believe in the Old Testament, then you have to believe that God gave the land to the Jews.
Rabbi, I was born in Patterson, New Jersey,
Born in Patterson, New Jersey.
which
Okay.
is now the second largest Muslim population
Okay.
in America. They
Yeah.
want to change the name of Patterson to Palestine.
They want to change it to Palestine? Really? Heaven help us. God Almighty.
Yeah.
Take care, guys. Have a good day. Thank you very much.
No.